Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Nate, and welcome back to another weather forecast discussion, this time for March 14th, 2025. We are at day one of our multi day tornado outbreak, with some of these tornadoes being strong to even violent and long track in nature. And so, we're going to be breaking all of this down here in this video as it goes from Friday all the way through into Sunday. If you haven't already, please be sure to share this with people who could potentially be impacted as well. We do have our risk for severe weather here today. A 4 out of 5 on the severe weather scale has been issued for portions of Iowa, Missouri, extreme northeastern Arkansas, northwestern Tennessee, western Kentucky, much of Illinois, as well as maybe a little bit of Indiana. The surrounding areas in the orange is a 3 out of 5. The main areas to watch is going to be areas in those yellows, oranges, and reds, with the reds being the more intense activity expected. So please be sure to watch out with that. They do have an additional risk for tornadoes compared to what we saw last night on our live stream, where a 15% chance of seeing a tornado within a 25-mile radius has been introduced near areas of St. Louis all the way down towards Cape Girardeau and Paducah. So definitely something to note. The Storm Prediction Center now has a higher confidence in some significant tornadoes potentially being possible over there. But do not sleep on the areas that are south of it, now over into portions of northern Mississippi and western Tennessee, as these storms will likely be supercellular and could evolve overnight into a significant tornado threat. In addition to our significant tornado threat, we also have significant damaging winds that are anticipated within this mesh area. This is where you could potentially see up to hurricane force wind gusts being possible. And so this is some very strong damaging winds that are going to be accompanied by a lot of these storms. And a lot of these areas over here could more than likely see that activity. And then we can take a look as well. The potential for some large hail is possible and upwards of golf ball sized and maybe even larger. So folks that may have some valuables outdoors, pets, cars, or any sort of expensive items that are outdoors, for at least this night here on Friday and is in this mesh area, we recommend that you bring them indoors or into some form of shelter or some form of garage to be able to protect life and property. We also want to take a look at the severe weather risk for Saturday, March 15, 2025. They did not upgrade it to a 5 out of 5 on the severe weather scale, but it is going to be very soon, more than likely. Just based off of what the new HRRR run said, oh boy, that is the certainty that we've been looking for in regards to what could potentially be a very prolific and, to quote the Storm Prediction Center, destructive event, as we have a lot of significant severe weather anticipated across the deep south over here, specifically into portions of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, as that continues to materialize more and more. Significant tornado threat is anticipated in a lot of these areas. The main risk here is going to be here in portions as far north as central Tennessee to as far south as the Gulf Coast, with once again a lot of significant tornadoes likely being in that red area there. We also have the threat for some significant damaging winds to accompany with it. I think that the 45% chance for wind could actually be expanded a little bit further towards the north. At least I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. And we also have the threat for some significant hail, once again golf ball size or larger, and this will be accompanied by our significant supercells that will likely form and sustain and likely continue to do damage more than just the tornado and the wind aspect, but also be strong and robust enough to produce some very large hail, once again, and upwards of golf ball sized. We also want to mention that the risk will continue into Sunday, severe weather risk that will continue to move off into the southeast and the mid-Atlantic. Definitely a lot more of a wind risk there. And then we also want to mention today a significant fire risk. There's going to be a lot of dry air that's going to come in behind this. You'll see a lot of that here later on in the video, as well as a lot of strong wind. You accompany the low moisture and the low relative humidity with some winds, and you have a very volatile environment that is basically begging for wildfires to be expansive and very, very dangerous. And so folks that are over there definitely are going to want to watch out for the potential of some wildfires in your area. Now we're going to try and speed run through this part of the video as quickly as we possibly can. We've seen a lot of this stuff with the videos that we've uploaded and the live streams that we've talked about, but we're going to try and just get through things as quickly as possible since you guys are probably going to want to get into what has changed with a lot of these models. Once again, the timing is in the top left-hand portion of your screen with this particular graphic and maybe some other graphics. But anytime you guys see a little dip in the jet stream like this is a trough that begins to develop. This is a trough that basically breeds low pressure systems, which eventually breeds severe weather setups more than likely. Anything that is the inverse of that, that is a ridge, and on the south side of that is usually accompanied by a high pressure system. Very strong concentrated winds with this first trough here, this first low pressure system as it continues to move on through. But the wind shear actually begins to die out. And although it does, it still is going to be able to create severe weather on the leading edge of that jet streak. You can see here that winds start to fan out in all sorts of different directions. This is what we call diffluence aloft. And that is going to create a lot of gaps in the atmosphere since all that wind is being spread out in all sorts of different directions. Those gaps in the atmosphere are going to become pretty widespread in a lot of these areas. And usually those gaps in the atmosphere, at least in the upper portions of the atmosphere, get filled in by the air that is below it. You get a lot of rising air that move off up into the upper portions of the atmosphere from below. And so that right there is going to be accompanied by some of our strong storms, and it just correlates really well compared to the risk that we showed you for our convective outlook today. So definitely some strong wind shear here that starts to move off here. 300 millibar wind shear. This is the extreme upper level wind shear that basically kind of just gives us a general idea as to where our concentrated wind shear once again is, as well as what could potentially be out in front of it. Here is our upper level jet streak. Here is the diffluence aloft to kind of illustrate it a little bit better. And you can see once again right in front of the jet streak is where we're going to be paying attention towards our most significant severe weather. And honestly, right in here, which is right in front of where our jet streak is at, that's going to be where we're going to see likely a lot of our significant weather. And that is the reason why the Storm Prediction Center has upgraded the tornado probabilities in those areas. Our 850 millibar wind shear, at least from this morning, is pretty significant across the board. You can already see from the border of Mexico and the United States all the way up into the other border with Canada. You can see it. We got some pretty strong wind shear here at the 850 millibar level. That's about 1 kilometer above ground level, if you will. And you can see as we move on through into the afternoon and into the evening tonight, very strong low-level jet here. We're talking some wind shear in upwards of 72 knots. That is well above average for typical severe weather setups. Typically, you see a lot of these oranges and these reds as our average for our low-level jet. This is well beyond that. And so accompanied with our strong wind shear here, you can get a lot of energy, you can get a lot of moisture, boom, you get your thunderstorms. But I want to talk about our strong wind behind it. You can still once again see there is some strong wind that moves across portions of Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma. This is going to be accompanied by our strong amounts of dry air, our low relative humidity that begins to build up more and more. And you can absolutely see how low these dew points get. We're talking about dew points as low as 8, maybe even lower than that. I mean, this is just drier than the Sahara type dry. And so once again, very, very well pronounced wildfire risk out for a lot of these areas in the Central Plains, back in behind this very well-defined low-pressure system as it spirals on through. Our moisture out in front of this event, at least for the northern risk, will be somewhat plentiful along the boundary, but anything out in front of the boundary doesn't seem to be too crazy. And the other thing to note as well is you typically want a lot of these blues to be able to show up in order for you to get some sustained activity. And so up until then, we kind of have just enough moisture, but not too much or not really anything expansive moisture-wise to be able to help initiate a lot of these thunderstorms. And instead as well, we also have a lot of signs here of some very disturbed portions of the atmosphere with our isobars. Right along this boundary here is showing some pretty significant vorticity, and a lot of these storms that are going to be forming are likely going to be along this boundary, colliding between the moist air mass and the dry air mass that is coming in behind our low pressure system. And so as this moves on through, you can also see the potential for our moisture to rise up into our general atmosphere here to be all the more likely, especially as we get into the overnight hours here at around 3Z. That would be sometime around 8 p.m. Central Time, so definitely something to watch out for, maybe even a little bit after 8 p.m. Central Time as well, as this continues to move about. Moisture continues to be very plentiful, so basically areas here from central Illinois and northeastern Missouri and south, that is, in my opinion, where it is more likely for our significant storms to form, at least in this environment. If we head a little bit further south, our moisture continues to show that it is very much so in abundance, and a lot of these areas over here into portions of western Tennessee and northern Mississippi, if storms do form over there, they will more than likely be pretty expansive. So that'll definitely be something that we'll have to watch out for as well. High amounts of convective available potential energy, the buoyancy in the atmosphere that allows particles and parcels of air to rise pretty rapidly. A lot of energy that is pretty evident over in a lot of these areas. You typically want to see a lot of the dark greens in order for you to see some severe weather, some of which you even get higher than that, and upwards of the yellows, which is about 2,000 joules per kilogram, even up to 2,500 joules per kilogram as you head off well into the overnight hours. That continues to sit across the Mississippi River, heading even well into the midnight and the overnight hours within that general vicinity as well. So definitely something to watch out for, at least with that. So I want to take a look at a combined parameter here that takes both the wind shear, the significant wind shear that we just saw, and the convective available potential energy, and it outputs into one particular parameter space. It's called the Energy Helicity Index. And basically, once you get into the tans and the reds, that's when stuff starts to become really prominent with our combination between the significant shear and our rising. And we start to see a lot of it over here. I mean, take a look at that. We get a lot of rising once we get towards the 8 p.m., 7 p.m., 6 p.m. time frame. Realistically speaking, all the ingredients continue to seem favorable for storms to form, even down into portions of Tennessee and Mississippi. That will continue well into the overnight hours as that moves off. And so let's take a look at the timings here specifically as this materializes. Around 22Z, 23Z, even a little bit earlier than that at around 21Z, that is when storms are going to begin to form. We're talking as early as 4 p.m. Central to as late as probably 6 p.m. Central is when these storms are going to try and build and become a little bit more organized before we get to real intense activity here heading into 6 and 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. These storms will likely become all the more severe and significant as they continue to move off towards the east, and these will continue to march its way further into portions of central Illinois before, as we get towards the midnight time frame here for central, storms will then start to kind of wane just a little bit as our next risk for severe weather also begins to build over into portions of Kentucky and Tennessee, as well as into northern Mississippi. And these storms, if they are able to sustain, will likely end up potentially producing tornadoes as well. Even the stuff that gets down into central portions of Mississippi. If you look at that, more storms are definitely possible, and some of these could definitely produce your tornadoes as well. Strong damaging winds are expected in portions of Iowa as well as northern Illinois. By the time it gets to areas like, say, Chicago, it'll be pretty widespread and scattered. Same thing for areas in southern Wisconsin as well. So really, it's just the areas that are pretty much south of Rockford, south of Chicago, into central Illinois, and south of central Illinois down into portions of eastern Missouri. That is really where you're going to want to watch out for your main significant severe weather to be possible. All right, so let's speed run this now for Saturday's event. You can see our low pressure system moves on through, and it actually starts to dissipate And so, in the process of the old low pressure system starting to die, a new trough and a new low pressure system will begin to develop. A new low pressure system will likely exist somewhere over here in the portions of Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, maybe a little bit further south of that, depending upon the placement of it. But very strong wind shear, as you can see, move on through. And once again, out in front of the main jet streak is where we could potentially see our significant severe weather. We do have that diffluence aloft. Indeed, you can see how the wind starts to spread across in all sorts of different directions, especially here on Saturday morning. And that will continue to be the case all the way throughout, even into Saturday afternoon, evening, and into Sunday morning, where that continues to march its way further and further east. Our jet streak, you can definitely see that over here, especially as you get to Saturday afternoon. Right in front of the main bulk of the jet streak is where we could potentially be seeing some significant severe weather. It is definitely interesting with our timing here. At least in the early afternoon hours, the main area that is right in front of the jet streak is over here in central and northern Mississippi. And that is definitely a strong sign for some significant storms that are going to be able to form out into this environment. So that's definitely something to note here within that as well. Very strong low-level jet. It's about as strong as the day prior, especially as that heads off further and further into the afternoon to the evening. So absolutely no issues with that whatsoever. Accompany that with a very, very moist environment here. You can see dew points with these blues and even some purples that are evident across the board. That is very favorable for some severe weather development. But I also want you guys to pay attention to these isobars. You see how we have a bunch of little waves here within the isobars? This is already some disturbance in the atmosphere here that is already being picked up at 15Z, which is around 10 a.m. Central. That is pretty crazy here. Dew points continue to increase. The wavies, if you will, start to become even wavier. This is a very disturbed atmosphere. Vorticity is rather high within this general environment. And because of that, pretty much anywhere that forms in these wavies, any storms that form in these wavies, is where you're going to probably see some significant, I'm telling you, significant activity as this continues to bolster up further and further. Pair that with the convective available potential energy that basically sits over the area overnight and even further into Saturday, and it even starts to uptrend too. That's another big difference here with the HRRR, is that the instability has uptrended and increased for portions of Mississippi, and you have a very volatile environment. We're talking 3,000 joules per kilogram of CAPE in some areas. Once again, this is definitely a very expansive risk for severe weather, but even beyond just the high-end parameters in these colors, these blues will be able to get it done. You only need, once again, about 1,200 joules per kilogram of CAPE in order for you to have a typical tornado day, like an average tornado day. And so the fact that we're having some of these energy levels above average is just one ingredient that shows you as to why this event is as significant as it is. And when we take a look at the energy helicity index, once again, you're able to see as we get over from Saturday into Sunday, you can see there is a lot of energy that is basically sitting over this area, and it is basically just waiting for it to be used. And heading into Saturday, late morning into the early afternoon, you can absolutely see how everything just evolves. Everything just absolutely goes nuts, if you will. And it is a very, very prime environment, a absolutely more intense environment than Friday, if you will. And it just goes to show you that there will be a lot of significant storms if they are able to form and if they are able to sustain, which more than likely will be the case. So we'll talk about timings here as well as the 6Z HRRR and show you guys what has changed. Early morning convection over here overnight past midnight into the early morning hours of Saturday is definitely possible. Some of these storms could potentially be significant as well, but it's not really as consistent as to where and when some of these storms are going to be. So it's just definitely important for people to be weather aware overnight Friday into Saturday. as we get over into the early morning hours here on Saturday, we start to see a lot more storms begin to form over here on the northern extent. This is not really going to be as much of your big risk here as much as this is about to be in the afternoon, where we have numerous significant supercells being printed here by the HRRR from as far south as New Orleans to as far north as Columbus and Tupelo, Mississippi. That'll continue to expand and further head off towards the east. And I mean, just look at this here, guys. I mean, this is absolutely intense. And a lot of these storms even get up into northern Alabama and southern Tennessee, potentially even central Tennessee, as it continues to move on through. Every single one of these supercells that form here on Saturday has the potential to produce strong, long-track, violent tornadoes that could move off through into a lot of these areas. So it is very important for a lot of these people in this general vicinity to be weather aware and be mindful of what these storms can do. Please have a plan of action ahead of time. If you are in a mobile home, figure out where to go during a tornado event, because mobile homes are not safe. Make sure that if you are going to be taking shelter in a lowest innermost part of your building, you want to add helmets, pillows, mattresses, any ways you can be able to put as many walls between yourself and the outdoors as possible. Or if you want to take shelter outside of it, there's storm shelters in some of these areas. There's even, if you can't find anything and you need to go to a last resort, marts, all right? Shopping marts or any sort of gas stations, go into the beer coolers and stuff like that. Once again, think about how you're going to be safe as these storms move on through, even into the overnight hours heading in from Saturday into Sunday, as these storms will continue to move off towards the east and still even try to be significant to some extent, albeit not as significant as it was earlier on in the day, but still something to be mindful. Definitely some strong damaging winds as the event starts to transition from one style of an event to another. Hopefully everyone got the information that they needed here. Once again, now is the time to prepare. Please be safe, everyone, and we'll be covering this. At minimum, we'll be covering this for the next 3 days here, starting with tonight. Likely a live stream sometime at around 5 Central, maybe a little bit after that. We'll see, give or take, when the storms could potentially be forming, but we want to make sure that everyone gets the information that they may need. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, turn on notifications, share this with friends and family on social media. Also follow me on social media, link will be in the description down below. I will catch you guys tonight. We will be live streaming the significant event here for portions of the Ohio Valley, as well as the Midwest, as well as portions of the Deep South. So we'll catch you guys at that point. Everyone, please stay safe. I'll see you later.